Good afternoon and welcome back, everybody. My name is Nick Pearce. I'm the Director of the Institute for Policy Research, one of the co-hosts of today's conference. I apologise to those of you watching earlier that my internet connection went down just as I was introducing the first session of the afternoon. Hopefully it won't happen again. I thought we had a great session just now with Thomas Pally and Bernard Newmarker talking about fiscal and monetary questions and the financing of basic income. And I know that's a subject that's very close to our next speaker's heart, to Geoff Crocker. I'm very pleased to introduce. Geoff is a partner with the Institute for Policy Research in our research program on the economics of basic income. He's also a partner with the Basic Income Conversation and indeed with today's conference event with Bristol, a Festival of Ideas, Bristol Ideas. And Geoff is the author of this book, Basic Income and Sovereign Money. So the questions that we were just hearing, particularly Thomas Pally talk about the financing of UBI, are issues that are addressed very directly by Geoff in his proposals for a basic income financed by sovereign money, paid for by sovereign money, rather than from fiscal policy or government debt. And these are the issues that we've explored in different ways in recent conferences, and certainly are going to be doing so more in our research. So, Geoff, I'm really pleased to welcome you this afternoon. We're going to hear Geoff talk, and then Geoff will pass us into the next and final session, which will be the session chaired by Neil Lawson of Compass. But Geoff, I think that's probably enough by way of introduction from me, and over to you to give us your thoughts on the conference today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick, and thank you particularly you and Tom and Bernhard actually all endorsed my book very kindly. So first of all, thank you to Andrew Kelly and the team at Festival of Ideas, and to Nick and the team at Institute for Policy Research for hosting this second conference on basic income. And in both this year's and last year's conference, we've deliberately tried to include a very broad, wide spectrum of views so that we can debate the arguments for and against basic income fairly comprehensively. And we've also thought through various social and economic implications of basic income proposals. So firstly, I'd like to recap the various sessions that we've had today, both to remind those who have been here all day of the main points that have been raised, and perhaps to act as a filler for people who weren't able to attend all of the sessions. And after that recap, I'd then like to summarize what I see as the arguments for basic income in order to act as a prompt for the final session, which is going to be a very stimulating debate led by my colleague Neil Lawson, who's director of Compass think tank. So trying to recap today's conference sessions, which thank you to all of the contributors because they were well thought through, they were wide, and they were very diverse. They were very honest. So where people disagreed with the basic income proposal, they felt free to say so and to propose alternative welfare strategies. So firstly, we had Martin Ford, a leading author on automation, and with his book on robotization and his previous books on the same subject, Martin's well established in this field. Martin pointed out that artificial intelligence is actually expanding our intelligence, which has been the fundamental generator of our capability and our progress economically and in society. So AI is expanding this natural intelligence, and he outlined possible two outcomes: the utopian Star Trek outcome, where everything is benign and beautiful and well provided for us. It's a post-scarcity economy and society, but also the possibility of a dystopian, what he calls matrix outcome, where technology becomes rather malignant. And so Martin emphasized our need to manage AI towards desirable social outcomes. We need to have a high level of awareness as to what's happening and what's going on and where we need to mitigate and take alternative actions. So Martin also saw a need for some means of delivering income to people as automation reduces work, some means amongst which UBI is a possible contender. It has to be said, in the conversation, Martin didn't manage to persuade Diane Coyle, who was his interrogator, who remains unconvinced of UBI and, in her own words, not a fan. So there's obviously a long way to go in persuading the economics profession of the benefits of a UBI proposal. So then, in conversation with Gavin Kelly from Resolution Foundation, Anna Dent, who lives in Bristol, the same as I do, saw some role for basic income, but certainly challenged the argument from technology on the grounds that, we've been here before, we've had technological progress for a very long time, and so far technology has not caused either the mass unemployment or the income collapse that it's been said to bring about. So we've been there before and it hasn't happened. Neither did she see technology having the impact on work that is claimed as being inevitable. So there's some qualification there from Anna. Kate Bell was even stronger. Kate Bell from the TUC in the UK was even stronger in denying that technology led to a case for UBI. And for Kate, current work and welfare systems could rather be improved. So there we're generating questions for the debate that's to follow. Then in a session that Andrew Kelly chaired, Anna Coote presented a pretty interesting synthesis of public services and personal income guarantee in her proposed social guarantee. But Anna remains critical of UBI proposals, amongst other objections for its affordability, and what she sees as its free market orientation compared to a more community-based emphasis within basic services. So Anna prioritizes a UBS, a Universal Basic Services proposal. In the same session, James Plunkett expressed the need, as he sees it, from his current role facing people in income deficiencies. He expressed the need for a simpler welfare system, which was less stigmatizing, less hostile, and therefore more similar to a potential UBI system. So we then moved into more positive positions on UBI. And in contrast to previous views, Sarath Devala, joining us from Hyderabad, pointed out that throughout the world, jobs are declining, wages are stagnating, and in his view, the Beveridge model doesn't address current problems of precarity, of job quality. He pointed out that only 6% of jobs in India are good jobs and 94% are, quotes, bad jobs. And in Sarath's view, UBI is an essential ingredient in a new welfare system and indeed in the foundation of a new concept of society, a new social model. Technology, in his view, makes UBI possible because it can produce. It can produce efficiently, and we should, in his view, take this opportunity from technology rather than seeing technology as a threat. His compatriot Mahendra Dev pointed out that 10 million jobs were lost in India during the pandemic, that health and education systems are very weak and need to be massively strengthened, and that targeted welfare benefits do face the problem of identification of recipients. There is a growing consensus in India for cash transfers, which is, of course, a quasi-UBI. Cleo Goodman was in the group. Cleo pointed to lessons from the UK furlough scheme, which paid £24,000 a year to 3 million people, costing £72 billion, plus the increase of £20 in universal credit and a reduction in conditionality. So UBI has a great advantage, Cleo says, in enabling unpaid work and to demonstrate trust in people via reduced conditionality. And indeed, I guess that people who will argue more in favor of targeted benefits than they would for universal basic income would probably support a decrease in conditionality. Young Choi said the Korean system simply doesn't meet social need. It's become an asset-based economy, and that UBI will be a great assistance there. And Jane Miller helped the group explore steps towards a UBI, for example, a government debit card, or addressing group UBIs, for example, to farmers or to women or to children. And we heard from Mayor Sumbal Siddiqui in Cambridge, Massachusetts, of the pilot scheme there, which is covering 130 carers for 18 months with $500 a month. We've just had the session on economics where Bernhard Neumaker, my colleague, described his net basic income scheme. He presented a very sound critique of means testing and a proposal for his net basic income scheme to deliver crisis stabilization, switching back to a UBI scheme in normal economic circumstances. And then Thomas Pali, renowned economist based in the USA, does consider UBI both feasible and desirable, but in his view, says that UBI must be funded by taxation and that UBI advocates must not shy away from that. So he pointed out that a transitional UBI of $1,000 a year would cost less than 1% of GDP, but a full UBI, which he defined as $12,000 a year, would cost 10.2% of GDP. And that without stretching debt to GDP ratios beyond their present, even Japanese levels, we wouldn't be able to pay for such a high level of basic income without increasing taxation. So I hope that's a rather fast review and recap of the contributions, the varied contributions that we've had today for the debate that is about to follow. So from these contributions and from other sources, I'd now like to try to summarize the arguments, the counter-arguments, and the counter-counter arguments for UBI, for what promises to be a very stimulating final panel discussion. There is a wide set of arguments for UBI, which I've tried to set out on the site, quotes the case for basic income, which is at www.ubi.org. These arguments range from the philosophical through to the ethical, through to the managerial, through to the economic and social. So I'll try to set those out in some sort of order, I hope. The philosophical argument is to do with what's often called a birthright claim, i.e. it's a claim about human ontology. Just as everyone is born with free access to resources like sunlight and rain and nature, so the argument goes, everyone should have access to the inherited infrastructure and technology we have and the goods and services they generate. We work to provide some of our needs, but we have some good things bestowed on us. It's what theologians would call providence, but we don't need to be religious to recognize that there is a providential element in life. This is, the argument says, and should be universal and not restricted to an elite. So a universal basic income philosophically recognizes this birthright claim. Secondly, the objective of social justice, and of course the widely shared objective of social justice, is put forward as a powerful argument for basic income. Here, though, it does clearly compete with other proposals to achieve greater social justice, firstly from traditional targeted welfare benefits. At this point, UBI argues its advantage in eliminating the humiliation of means testing and, very importantly, avoiding the steep withdrawal tapers of targeted benefits, where benefits withdrawn almost pound for pound if somebody finds work, creating familiar unemployment and poverty traps. Critics claim that UBI disincentivizes work, whereas in fact advocates of UBI reply that the current welfare system disincentivizes work whilst UBI would not. Who's right? Question for discussion. UBI also has to compete with alternative proposals for social justice, such as universal basic services, which Anna Gut outlined, and job guarantee schemes, which are proposed by the MMT community. Again, which is best? So UBS provides services chosen by democratically elected government. UBI allows choices to be made individually. Job guarantee schemes rely on the concept that work and wage will continue to be a source of adequate family income. And that's a reliance which I'm about to question. Thirdly, the managerial claim is that UBI is the most efficient and effective of all welfare systems, costing much less to administer than a means-tested conditional system, and achieving 100% take-up, which targeted benefits, particularly to the elderly, often fail to do. The human claim is that UBI will allow greater lifestyle choice, greater human flourishing, freedom from the 8 to 4 or the 9 to 5 straitjacket, whilst the ecological claim is that UBI will break the link currently requiring more work and therefore more output and more pollution to generate adequate family incomes. Finally, the claim from technology has been prominent in today's discussion. Robots are replacing jobs. They're already replacing jobs, and we're told they're going to do so even more. But the technology argument, I would suggest, is more subtle, also more subtle. Automation vastly increases the output we achieve from each hour worked. Simple arithmetic then suggests that aggregate wage in the economy will decline as a proportion of the value of output. And historic economic data indeed shows that for the whole post-war period, this has been the case. Extensive research at IPR Bath has shown that technology does reduce the labour share in the economy. Employment income has fallen relatively, requiring increased income from unearned sources, mainly welfare benefits, dividends, pensions, and household debt. This debt led to economic crisis in 2007 and to our current economies being swamped by household debt and government debt, the latter equal to or greater than annual GDP. In other words, it's not a repayable debt. No economy can repay 100% of its GDP. But these limits are forcing us into austerity to try to limit its growth further. We're trapped in the present paradigm that we've created. The tail is wagging the dog. The artifact is controlling humanity. This is unsustainable and leads to an argument for basic income funded by central bank issue of debt-free sovereign money. In an imaginary totally automated economy with no labour and no wages, all income would be basic income. Isn't it therefore reasonable to argue that partial automation requires partial basic income? And on the question of debt-free sovereign money, which I note my colleague Thomas Pally is very critical of, and in my recent discussions with many central bank executives, they've been more convinced of the argument for debt-free sovereign money than they are yet of the argument for basic income. So work and wage are changing. All welfare systems like universal credit and all party political policies, including socialist ones, rely on the idea of high wage work to deliver income. But can we continue to rely on work and wage as a means of getting adequate income to people? We now see immense bifurcation of the labour market. Mega salaries coexist with low pay, in-work poverty, and the low job satisfaction of bullshit jobs. The debate's whether this is a behavioural problem due to exploitative capitalism or a structural problem due to technology requiring less work, or both. Is the right answer greater labour bargaining power, or do we have to acknowledge the inevitability of technology sucking income out of the economy and hence implement a basic income? We urgently need to firstly get income to people, secondly to get debt out of the economy at both household and government level. Isn't this a powerful argument for basic income funded by sovereign money? Affordability is the great objection to basic income. Either basic income is too small to be meaningful or too large to be affordable. In accounting terms, that seems to be the case, or basic income requires huge tax increases. But the above techno-economic analysis claims otherwise. Keynes famously said that anything we can actually do, we can afford. Technology is enabling us to produce ever more efficiently. We can afford its output through a basic income. Consider the recent furlough scheme. We did, as I say, pay £24,000 in the UK a year to 3 million people, costing £72 million, which we funded as part of the Bank of England purchasing £875 billion of government debt, which, since the government owns the Bank of England, is not really debt at all. Here is a powerful economic proof of the possibility of basic income funded by debt-free sovereign money, or not. So, Neil Lawson, my colleague from Compass think tank, over to you. I think it's going to take a second or two whilst the technology leads from this session to the session that Neil's now going to chair. Thank you so much.